That's wonderful. You know, it reminds me of how I started to learn about this center, right? We have the Portage County, the Women's Fund of Portage County, which is over 25 years old now. And when I hear the stories of the women in this community who started that in the 90s, and seeing how far they've come and what the impact has been. And we're going to share a little bit more about that. We're going to extend Women's History Month into April so that you can hear more about their strategic plan. But in talking to Lena, who isn't technically a speaker on this, but you know, we're going to hear her voice eventually. Is that she, when I was telling her about the strategic planning of the Women's Fund, so generously offered to connect this network, right? And help us begin to think about the data that is so important to inform where the greatest challenges are right now. Could you maybe talk a little bit about some of that data that's driving UWSP to embrace this center?
Sure. So we have some of the major studies featured on our website. If you go to uwsp.edu/women lead, you will be able to find the McKinsey study, the Kane Insight study, and a link to the UW Green Bay research that they've also done. And there's some incredible work out there around the global perspective on women, as well as our national and more local women impacts. The pandemic wasn't kind to women. Women left the workforce in record numbers. We are not yet seeing that momentum come back. And there's some real life impact behind these data points as far as what women are struggling to fill many needs across many different landscapes, right? And how much bias they're running into still, even though we may see ourselves as a more gender parity and equity country. It's definitely a topic that we're hearing more about, but in practice, is that what women are experiencing? You know, is that a healthy work culture? Do they have the flexibility they need? Are women of, you know, BIPOC women, are those women feeling an impact that's different than what, you know, women of a white origin are facing? So there's so many good data points that are just compelling the reason that we need a center here in our region now.
And it does come down for a lot of folks to bottom line. And when you're looking at the numbers, particularly as Jessica pointed out, with sort of stepping a little bit away from the immediacy of the pandemic and the consequences of all that, one of the studies revealed that for every woman that's being promoted into sort of a director position, we have 2 female director positions leaving that pipeline because of burnout, because there was never any subtraction taken away of duties, of responsibilities, but it's always an add. You know, there's always more and more responsibilities, and we're still sort of holding on to the late the late 20th century idea of women can have it all. I remember growing up with that and being a teenager and thinking it was really good for me for a moment to feel motivated and empowered to do the things that I wanted to do, to have the freedom and the privilege to do the things that I wanted to do as a woman and as a white woman. But that is sort of like the technicolor version of it, and it doesn't represent the struggle and what it means to have it all, what actually is given up in those circumstances. And so if women have to choose family or work, more often than not, they're going to choose family. And that means fewer women in the workforce, and certainly fewer women in leadership roles that have more responsibility. So we're not getting those perspectives. That then just affects the economy. You know, if you're not having these valuable workers invested, producing, sharing ideas, innovating, and along the way doing the work that we're seeing women do in terms of that equity inclusion aspect in their workplaces that often goes unreported or unrewarded. If you're taking that away, then you're negatively affecting the economy. And you're also changing up how spending is happening as well when you're taking those women out of the workforce, or women are moving to part-time or positions that have more flexibility so that they are able to manage home and work.
We talked a lot about that broad impact, right? The value women bring to business and economy when they're in the workforce. What about men? Why should men be allies to an idea of a women's center?
So I love this topic. I'm really excited about the work that we've started doing on the topic of allyship. We all know in the central Wisconsin region, there are a lot of men leaders, and that's a great thing. And we don't want to detract from that or say in any way, shape, or form that that's an unattractive thing. We just want more women in the room with the men. So we want allies that are curious and humble and authentic and vulnerable, courageous, active listeners, unifiers, accountable. And really what that boils down to me is just another way to be good leaders. So we're not asking our male leaders to do anything differently than what leadership would already be asking, right? We want them to look around the room, see who's not there and who can be invited into the room to have a seat at the table with them. So we have an incredible research team that is tackling allyship early on in this work. I think Jim Survey is here actually, and he's one of our main researchers. And we'll be looking at how allyship benefits women specifically, but also how it will help the allies. There is definitely mutual benefits. When people pool their resources together from different perspectives, there's outcomes that wouldn't have been achieved if people in the room are all of the same background and the same perspective. So really excited about the work that our team is launching right now and where we can go with that in the future relatively shortly.
It's so exciting. You know, I'm as a Gen Xer and I'm married to a Gen Xer, and our whole marriage over 25 years we've been together, we've been able to sort of play off of each other. Like one of us has a job with benefits, so the other one can be a little bit more creative in their workspace. Or, you know, there was a time where Mike stayed home with the boys, and there were times I stayed home with the boys. And I recognize at this point in my life that that's really unique, what Mike and I have had. And when I hear him talk about his, how important women leaders have always been to him, that again, too, that we were just in a conversation about this recently, how unique that is to our generation. And we just sort of intuitively know that that's valuable. For someone who doesn't quite understand, okay, well, maybe they think about it as a pie that isn't going to grow. I think we all think about it, we can grow the pie, right? But maybe for someone who thinks that this isn't an issue, or maybe, or even further, maybe even questioning that this might take away from their own leadership as a male, how do you respond to that? Lena, do you want to jump in?
Can we all just note that I didn't speak for 18 minutes, and that's
we can.
Okay, so I just want to say that number one, you know, so hi everybody. I see so many friends here. It's lovely to see you. But and I'm going to draw Kevin into this conversation. Jenny's question is, will a focus on allyship be threatening? Does it exclude? Right? Not if we do it right. And the question comes back to, I love this question. It's about looking around the room and asking ourselves who is not there. But it's every room. It's the kitchen, it's the boardroom, it's the playground. And I have to tell you, I've really loved being a part of Kevin Newman's team, and watching him grapple as he's grown into leadership, watching him grapple what that means for the kind of father he wants to be. And you know what? I get frustrated and proud of him a lot, because I'm really frustrated when he won't come to my evening stuff. Honestly, I want him to come to my evening stuff. And you know what he tells me? He says, I got to get home to the kids. And God, I love that. I love that so much, because he's around the dinner table. He's right. So Jenny, I think it's back to that partnership that you just talked about. From an allyship perspective, one of the things that we're saying is, if we're going to use every resource that we have available to us in the workforce shortages that are rampant in the region, Everybody's got to play as full of a part as is satisfying and fulfilling for them and their families and their organizations. And we simply want to create pathways to enable and activate, right, and energize that.
I love that, satisfying and fulfilling. And isn't that that's the privilege of being able to have a career that is satisfying and fulfilling. Kevin, are you out there? So Kevin, for those of you that might not know, is Assistant Dean of the School of Business. Kevin, do you want to respond to Lena? Are you in a position to say anything?
Sure, she's met my kids too, so she knows that I actually have them, which is nice. Well, I think it is a balancing act for everybody, but I would echo. I'm a labor economist by trade before moving into this role, and so I would go back to the labor market aspect of this. That really, yes, individuals perhaps could feel threatened, but as a group, increasing the talent to the region, being able to draw on that plurality of perspectives and experiences, I've really seen how it's transformed my view of things as I incorporate more people into the decision-making process and for the Century School. And so I think it's only good for the region to be able to bring everybody into all of those rooms as mentioned. So it's suppose it is possible, as anything that's a little bit challenging could be. It might be challenging for a few, but I still think it's worth pushing through and hopefully helping them see the benefits of bringing everybody together.
Thanks, Kevin. I want to encourage people again to raise their hand or drop a question in the chat if you have one. Lena, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I just shared a link out to our main webpage, and I want to talk about this because, Jenny, the first level of allyship is conceptual. It's an ideal. It's like, oh, we look around, we get more people in. But where things get tough is when we actually start inviting different people into the room. And so the MBA, so this idea comes out of the MBA, and the MBA runs at 51% women right now. Generally, an MBA program, if you look at the metrics, is going to, all across the country, all around the world, is going to max out at about 35% women. So why are we 51% women? Well, because we featured Dr. Ray Shudu was the face of the program. And Kevin Newman and Marty Loy were my sponsors when I brought, and I needed that sponsorship because it was a fight to have Dr. Du be the face of our program. So everybody think about why would putting a slight, darker skinned Chinese woman on being the face of our MBA program, think about why would that have been tough? What was the pushback that I got that I needed Kevin and Marty's sponsorship to help me through? Right? It was, well, she's not representative of our total population. That was said out loud in rooms. Now, I wasn't trained on being a good ally. So I was more fierce than I had to be in those conversations.
Yeah. And it paid off.
But had I been prepared to bring the spirit of the work along with the drive of the work, that could have gone even better.
Well, and what you're talking about, Lena, I think is something important for those not as deeply connected as all of you are to UWSP, but the MBA program and how, as I've learned about it, how intentional it was to create an important leadership cohort in Central Wisconsin. One of the things you often hear is people pick their MBA program for the network as much as they do the course content. And this network is just, it's remarkable. And, the shift I'm watching it make in terms of overall leadership, how we treat each other, how we are all advocates for each other or sponsors for each other in rooms is already showing. So thank you for that. Thank you for UWSP for investing in that. So when I say all that, how is this center really dovetailing with the MBA program and other things that are coming out of this or being thought of at the School of Business and UWSP overall?
So
And
I do
maybe
hope
having
that
like-
some of this research that we're starting with will lead to some additional course content in the future for the university in some way, shape, or form. So we're pretty early in on the research, like I mentioned, but really excited about enhancing existing curriculum and resources with the work that this team is doing.
Great.
Well, Jenny, I'm gonna jump in here. I mean, I think it's beyond the Women's Center, I think, is beyond just the links with the MBA. I think obviously has an amazingly strong link with the MBA program, with the two women who are, you know, co-directors, co-founders here, who've done a lot of the work and who are leading, and obviously with Lena and the rest of the MBA team. But it fits in with broader priorities of the Century School. We've looked, while the MBA is about 51% women, the Century School is about 42-43%, which, given that higher ed is, you know, significantly above 50% for an undergraduate population, I kind of look at that and say something's a little bit amiss there. So we've been really looking to ramp up, you know, support and, you know, services and programming that attracts, you know, the undergraduate women population as well. So I don't know if she's here, but Debbie Byer, who's a finance professor, assistant finance professor, recently brought on. She also recently launched a Women in Business Club for undergraduates. And so they really pair well with each other to provide a group for our undergraduates to then connect with, you know, women in the MBA and, you know, elements of, you know, future elements of the Center for Women's Leadership that we're talking about today, to really, you know, scaffold off of each other and create a much more comprehensive strategic goal or priority for the Century School. So I think it'll be all kinds of things, greater focus. There'll be the public face, but we also have greater focus on the undergraduate level. I think, again, curricular programming, perhaps directly in the MBA, if not professional education. I think it's going to be really leading the way for a lot of things that we're doing in the school.
Very good. Thank you, Kevin. You know, are there also plans, and if there are other plans for people in the community and how they might engage in this work as you're developing it? I know there's still, like Jessica said, there's a lot still in development, which is why I'm hesitating to ask too directly, but I will. What are the ways that the community can engage in this work as well?
Yes, let's just be direct. Yes,
There we go.
We need lots of community engagement. Along with the allyship work that Jessica is heading, we're also looking to get as much qualitative data as possible. So we'll be launching this interview protocol through the month of April. So we're looking for folks in the community that want to be trained as interviewers. We want to have a lot of one-on-ones with women and with allies in our region, asking questions like, what does it look like if Wisconsin is, you know, doing well to recruit and retain women leaders? So that we can get perspectives of folks in the region from all different sectors, from volunteer, from government, from nonprofits, corporate, education, everybody. We need all of that data so that we can use it to really, really curate this wonderful center to fill the needs of this community, and also to have a tool to reflect on, you know, annually of like, are we still meeting the mark? I mean, I think this qualitative practice will be something that we are doing often, but we're really excited for this in kind of getting big picture ideas of what is lacking and also what is working, because we do have a lot of companies and organizations in this area that have been for a long time supporting this type of work and ensuring that there is space in leadership for women and that there is opportunity for women to develop their leadership styles, and that we are driving gender parity. Those organizations we want to be able to highlight in their work. And we also want to hear from them to help inform what we will be doing as well. So here's a homework assignment for those of y'all who would be so willing. I have just a very quick 4-question Microsoft form that just asks for your name and preferred contact information. If you would like to be a respondent in this interview, share your thoughts about how you think about women in leadership in our region, or if you would like to be someone who wants to interview women and allies in our region, we would just love to be able to get your contact information to get in touch with you. And then there's a last question that if you're a part of an organization that where we have value alignment, vision alignment, we would like to talk to you, get in touch with you, see what you're doing, see what's going really, really well, and if there's ways that the center can partner in your endeavors. So I'll put this in the chat.
Great, Sarah. While you're doing that, I just want to open up if anyone in the audience has any questions specifically for Sarah, Jessica, or Lena about the interview process, or if that sparked your curiosity at all.
And I think even to add to that, Ginny, if there's folks who, if our folks are having reactions to this or their own stories of women in leadership, in what they're doing, what are their stories, and how they've gotten to their positions, or in ways that they're supporting, or what they are wanting, what women or allies are wanting in order to support gender parity in leadership.
And so this is open to men as well, right? People of all genders can jump in. Great. You know,
Yes, please.
I was curious when I was listening to Kevin talk, he described decision-making processes and how bringing more women into the decision-making process. And that struck for me a question of, what are we observing the difference that makes when women are involved in the decision-making process? I'd be curious if your survey or the questionnaire interviews would capture information, data around that, qualitative.
I think that's a really interesting and powerful question. I taught ethics for years, and we can say one thing that is pretty solid in the research. If you think about how we make decisions, right? So business decisions have typically been cost benefit scenarios. So we weigh out, this is how we get to a consulting firm recommending to a Scandinavian country that they shouldn't actually engage in wellness policies to get people to stop smoking, because it was actually more financially beneficial if people smoked, because they died early and had less insurance costs, right? So this traditional way that we have historically trained leaders, particularly those coming out of the business track, to think is a cost benefit analysis. We know that when women are in the room, we can look at world wars, we can look at the way organizations are formed, we can look at lots of different sectors. We know that when women are in the room, the stakeholder model opens up. Right. So that is what changes. But Jenny, you and I know from both of us in our leadership roles, that makes things more complex. It makes decisions even harder to make, but more thoughtful and more potentially valuable.
Yep, takes a little bit more time, right? But the payoff is there. Stephanie, it looks like you have a question.
I do, thanks. So Jenny, listening to you talk earlier about, the dynamics in your family and the balance, I'm wondering if, I wish I could say that was my experience. From the time my children were very young, I was a single mother. So I'm wondering if the center is going to be looking at that, the dynamics of single parents, the additional, I'll say, issues that raises, because, when you say, have a choice between when to step back, when to put family first, single parents, especially single mothers, often don't face that choice.
Great question, Stephanie. Thank you.
Yeah, I am not a parent, Stephanie, but I am a daughter of a single parent. So I was raised by my mother and had, a couple of vacations with my dad. And so I I think that is sort of what pulled me into this work is seeing my mother in that struggle with all of her children, making sure that she was able to provide for her family, but also invest in herself so that she was doing the work that she had, that she felt connected to. Again, a huge privilege that she was able to get in a position where she was able to do that, but also the fact that her kids wanted to do everything. So we wanted to be in the play, and we wanted to be in band practice, and we needed to be at the early morning swim meets. And it was, well, I don't know how she does it. I don't know how single parents do it. But that is a perspective that is wholly valuable and is going to be a huge amount of women who we're going to serve. And I think that is in what a lot of the data that we're pulling up is, gosh, I think it was like 80% of working women in Wisconsin work for employers who do not offer any kind of childcare, which is an astounding number to me, knowing that is something that is a priority for a lot of the working women out there who have children. And also looking at the flexible working hours, flexible location, to be able to work from home. So I think that to me, where we're heading is, one, we're getting all of this information now, but how can we engage with employers to look at what practices they can be doing in order to support women and to fully support women, understanding that your employers are whole people with whole responsibility, and oftentimes that is a responsibility to children and a family. I hope that you will consider being interviewed, Stephanie, because that is a wholly valuable perspective that we need to make sure that we're really gleaning a lot of information from.
It's such a great reminder, just listening to your response, Sarah, and Stephanie's great question is what I also understand. It's like what we talked about right at the beginning, like the theme of this year's Women's History Month is celebrating women who tell our stories. And there is such what I understand is the center, you're centering women's stories, right? And that has often sat with me as I think about the words of Maya Angelou when I think about that, right? Like, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you do better. And so often it's these local stories, it's stories of, women that we see, or families we see in the grocery store, that mean more when we put into context the 85% of employers that don't offer childcare. When it's the people in our lives that we see every day, it drills down those big numbers into something that's really meaningful. And that's often where philanthropy starts to then play a role in how do we support the change in the community that aligns with the changing needs of the community. Can you talk a little bit more about that story angle and what you're hoping women's stories do, or people's stories do, to shape the work of the center?
I come from the performing arts, so that's my whole life, and I learn through stories. That's how I engage in the world, and I find it to be hugely impactful in being able to put a different kind of value to how we're looking at our neighbors, where we're seeing them struggle and where we're seeing them succeed, and really connecting to that. So I'm also well, I think we've talked about this. I'm also in the MBA, so this is part of my fellowship. But through that, been learning a lot about appreciative inquiry. I mean, the ability to really listen for understanding, and then pick up and then start to dive deeper into the issues. What is root causes? What is the things that women value in our region? I mean, starting right there, making sure that we have a really good understanding of what is most important and what are the issues that are most important to women that we need to have a close handle on. So I certainly am ready for that aspect, both in just generating interest, sponsorship, et cetera, into development into the center, as seeing storytelling as something that continues to compel the work and evolve the work of the center.
It's so interesting to me, Sarah, the combination of arts and the, getting your MBA. And so thank you for sharing your story. It's like the people who are shaping this are really coming with a unique perspective as well. Jessica, would you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So storytelling. I come from a vast background of financial analysis, planning and forecasting, and it's all about what story do you tell with the data and how do you bring those insights to the table to drive action. I am extremely action oriented. I'm someone that sees first, which I learned in the MBA program is a rare quality. So instead of calling myself a misfit, which is how I felt through much of my corporate life, I now have determined to be rare. And I want to highlight other women that are also rare and use what I've gone through in my life, both personally and professionally, to make sure other people have a straighter path and a clearer angle and the fewer roadblocks. So I am recently a widow. In the past 2 years, I lost my husband. So coming at it also from a adult female losing a life partner with an adult daughter. And again, that multi-generational focus of what do we do for the women in our community and how do we do better for our younger women than what we as Gen Xers or older generations have had happen to them. The change that you can control versus the change that you can't control.
I love that. Highlight who are rare, the stories that are rare. And thank you for sharing your story. So I know I can see all these beautiful people who are on this call as I scroll through. And so many of you I know have pretty remarkable stories yourself. I'd love to hear from some of you about what you're hearing today and how you feel like it benefits the community to have a center like this forming at UWSP. I could call on people. Would you like that?
I'd love to hear from Jim O'Connell, who has been a tremendous sponsor for women in his program. I can think of several off the top of my mind that I know he's played a transformative role in. So Jim, as we're using formal language to talk about your daily practice, what are you thinking?
Well, thank you, Lena. I'm thinking that I love this. I am excited for centering this conversation. I remember when I was in graduate school, one of the people the job that I had in graduate school in arts management was I was the house manager of the Wisconsin Union Theater. And one of the people who was an undergraduate when I started my graduate program and later followed me into the graduate program was a young woman who worked the box office often when I was working as managing the house. And she followed me into the graduate program and is extraordinary. But she decided, and I was so irritated. I remember clearly how irritated I was when she decided that she was going to specialize in marketing rather than go for executive director jobs because she wanted to have a family. And it frustrated me to see somebody with incredible leadership potential, not that you can't lead from a specialist role, but somebody who had such incredible leadership potential limit herself, limit her career by choosing to go in that direction. I later served on a board with her. She remains terrific, is a fabulous leader, but I still remember that moment of frustration. And it wasn't a moment. You may be able to hear it. It lasts till this day. I believe that the world is better if everybody achieves their potential, or if everybody strives to achieve their potential. And whatever limitations, whether they are self-imposed or societally imposed, that we can get the hell out of the way, the better off we and the world will be.
Thanks, Jim. You are an amazing ally. I think I've only met you dressed in a Santa Claus costume, but I hear your story as an ally in so many places in our community. It looks like, oh, Lena, you wanted to jump in, and it looks like maybe Jane Johnson came off mute too, so I want to make sure we get Jane in there.
I just wanted to see if Julie Bonasso, again, putting someone on the spot, but so what Jim got to were structural issues, how the structure, how the marketplace isn't structured for women to be their best whole selves. So Julie is an amazing coach and leader. She works with executive women. Are you seeing any patterns in that space, Julie?
Yeah, that was one of the things that I thought about as you were talking about the mission of the center, is curious about the approach that you're going to take to address the systemic problems that I see all the time with my clients, which is that they're really up against what has traditionally been a white male dominated culture, and they're having challenges with their productivity, their health and well-being, of integrating their self with career. And so I kind of see this as another avenue for what you might be focusing on. And that was a question I had. What are some of the things that you're thinking about doing as part of the center to really get to the systemic challenges as I see them?
Well, I'll say this. I will say that there is a service arm and there is a consulting arm to this work. And the consulting arm has to be done behind closed doors, so it's not to any leadership team's embarrassment, but that we can help them see the factors that would systemically help them be more successful. And so, Julie, we need you in the needs assessment. I hope you'll be putting your name forward to be an interviewer perhaps, or be an interviewee. We need that perspective. Jenny, thanks for letting me jump in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thanks, Julie. And it's always fun to have people get to know Julie too. She's a remarkable consultant, national consultant right here in Stevens Point. So someone that I would encourage anyone in thinking about getting a coach to think about Julie. Jane, are you still out there? I saw you come off mute. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah. So hi,
introduce yourself, just in case people don't know who
yeah.
you are.
I'm Jane Johnson. I'm an Episcopal priest, and I serve the Beloved Community, which is an Episcopal and ELCA church living together as one community. So I was really drawn to this conversation today because within talking about institutional issues and systemic issues, like I live and breathe in one of those and work in one of those, and have really felt drawn to empower female voices, because as we all know, the church was built by men for men, created for men. It's a man's worldview, and is still stuck in that paradigm in many, many ways, even though they've empowered women in certain ways. Obviously, I come before you in that position, but the paradigm shift has been, this is who we are. Women figure out how to fit into that, which means we do what was just talked about. We shape ourselves, we make ourselves smaller, we figure out how to put it in man speak or whatever. And so part of what I'm being called to do is figure out how to do that within the institution, how to empower women to do that. Lots of dreams, but kind of at that burgeoning point of trying to gather some people together to figure out what does that work look like, knowing that it's just going to be a seed that's planted and hopefully be a mighty oak that uproots the entire ground. So I am just wondering how these things can intersect, because I think this is such important work. All of these systems around us, even the ones that have been somewhat marginalized, are still very much in control of the waters that we swim in. And so however I can help, I would love to be a part of it. I would also love to learn from this, sit at your feet and learn so that I can help to break things open in that direction. But knowing that I probably won't have a lot of capacity until after Easter.
That makes sense.
Jane, you said one of my favorite phrases is empowering women. I love that so much. And I'm working with, personally with women of faith in different denominations. And they actually recommended a great book that I recently finished called Powerful and Free, Confronting the Glass Ceiling for Women in the Church. I will find a link to that and put it in the chat if anyone's interested in seeing how the faith community is also embarking on some of this great work, like Jane just mentioned. And there are a lot of women of faith that are seeking to do more and live into their gifts and abilities for sure than what has been allowed in that system over time.
And it sounds like Jane is a perfect candidate to maybe be an interviewer and maybe interviewee. And we will, just as a reminder, we'll follow up tomorrow with an email with the links that are going in the chat here as well. So I know Sarah threw in the link a bit ago on, did you, Sarah? Did you throw it in there yet? Yeah. To sign up, and we'll get that out as well. Devin had a really great statistic. Devin, do you want to jump in and share and tell us who you are and share some of the really great data that you just highlighted in the chat?
Hey everyone, hope we're doing well. So my name is Devin. I'm a double UWSP alum as well. Finished up that MBA program back in 2019. I was just pulling some data from the ALICE report here, just echoing those earlier comments. 66% of single female-headed households are below that ALICE threshold, compared to just under 50% of single male-headed households.
Thank you. You know, I will say ALICE is one of my favorite data sources. I think I cried when I first read the first ALICE report. I mean, for me, it's like we finally brought some of the story of rural communities. You can highlight that by focusing on ALICE. So ALICE is, for those of you that don't know, it's, oh, I'm blanking on the A.
Asset limited income constrained.
Thank you, Kaylin. So it's an acronym that the United Ways across the country have been using and drilling down data to the county level, which is just huge, on families that are about a bit above poverty, but not making a wage high enough to truly support their families. So it really has been a game changer. The new ALICE data is coming out this spring, and we cannot wait. Kaylin, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just thinking about today's conversation, and I think that's the true beauty of having a very proactive and visionary approach to a conversation about women's equity, development, and leadership, that then opens the doors to our thinking about other data. You know, Kevin mentioned data he's looking at for the undergraduate female students in the Century School of Business, and then the ALICE data. Like, it's a conversation that's going to help us kind of piece together some trends and realities.
Yes, thank you very much, Kaylin. And for those of you that don't know Kaylin, would you mind introducing yourself too?
Sure. I'm Kaylin Pempek, and I'm the Executive Director of the Century Insurance Foundation.
Thank you. I think we have another hand raised. I'm just scrolling through. If you raised your hand, do you want to just jump in right now? I'm not.
Yeah, this is Ido. Yeah, can you hear me well, Jenny?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So I'm the executive director for Stevens Point Housing Authority, and one of, similar to the ALICE point, is that one of the populations that I want to make sure that you're including are like low income populations, because we serve a population that's much lower income compared to the general population in Stevens Point. Like the average annual income for our tenants is around like 17,000 and a little, and 49% of the household have children. So I always want to make sure that when these conversations are being held, you're also including people from different economic backgrounds in these conversations.
Thank you so much for that consideration and reminder, Idowu. That I think in terms of once we get to programming with the center, that's a huge priority, is the sustainability of it, both for all populations to be able to engage in the leadership development aspect of the program, and also for smaller organizations as well that may not have the funds set aside for this type of development in how they're framing their own organizations and supporting women in leadership. And I think along with that, looking for strong support in our community and understanding what strong support and sponsorship in our community does, to be able to make sure that this is not programming that is only available to folks in a certain income bracket. I feel like across the nation, that's covered. You know, we have a lot of good opportunities across the nation to engage in some spectacular leadership training, but it comes at a very, very high price. So we're looking at models that make it very accessible for the entire community, and really centering some of that work on populations where that income is at 17,000 or less, as you bring to light, Idowu, is important, because when we center that population and are able to say, like, are we meeting some needs? Are we meeting goals for that specific community? We're raising up the entire community. We're raising up all of our averages. We're raising up all of our ability to support and create a thriving community here in the area.
So Sarah, I'm curious, you know, when you talk about the centering of the population Idowu talks about, I'm guessing that this population will also be welcome to be part of the survey work, right? Whether you're choosing to, and could you talk a little bit about how you might think about shaping questions that are understandable? And I don't mean it from like a talking down to people, but, you know, most of the people, as we know, living in our area are, as a good friend of mine used to say, you know, Joe and Jane on the street, right? Like, how are we going to say this so that they understand and it makes sense and that they can truly be part of the conversation? Can you talk about that accessibility and how that might play into the survey work that you talked about?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're definitely looking at creating partnerships with a lot of different organizations in the community who serve other specific populations. I had just had a great conversation with Kate over at the Lincoln Center at ARC to make sure that we're looking at our senior women. So I think it's all in making sure that we have a really curious and empathetic crowd that's ready just to really engage in the storytelling, because that's the thing, as we keep saying, that's the thing that we want. That's the thing that's going to drive how we look at what the center needs to be doing for our region, how best we can support our region and women in our region. So I think in terms of the protocol, we have like a bank of, I don't know, like 75 questions at this point that are all aiming towards wanting to just glean as much information as we can from our community, but it'll start off pretty broad. How do you think about women in leadership? I mean, I think we have to start there with a lot of the respondents that we're talking to, and then dive deeper as we engage in that individual's story.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So I know we're almost at time, so I want to make sure Lena gets in her plug for dates that are coming up. You want to talk a little bit about that, and we'll pull this from the chat too and get it in your follow-up email tomorrow.
Talking about stories, I'm a little girl from nowhere. I was born on a carnival to a hippie woman in the summer of love in 1967. There's no reason for me to have a PhD or a master's degree, except for the wonderful sponsorship that I got from a rainbow, and I mean a true rainbow of women and men who supported me over my life. When I was 21, I was out earning both my parents by making $21,000 that year. I out earned both of them combined with that 21K. So just know that we have a heart. There are many of us who are part of this movement who have a heart for all the different kinds of women and all the places we show up. And I want to say that one thing we've really got to learn to do is talk about ourselves as one population. We are one population. And so I'd love to see you. We're going to be in Marshfield in March, part of the Mackey Working Women's Lunch. And then please mark your calendar. We're running the Women's Trailblazers and Entrepreneurship Conference. That's a full day on the 1st. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to have Kai-Ying, if you want to put up our next conversation. So you might have seen that we were advertising this for next week, but we've actually, from some scheduling opportunities, we are moving our next Women's History Month Community Lunch Hour to March 27th. And do you want to pull that back up, Kai-Ying? There we go. Thank you. And this is a really, really cool thing. The Portage County Historical Society has been working on this for over a year now, but they are bringing an exhibit, the story of women athletics in Portage County, celebrating 50 years of Title IX this year. And Nancy Page, who, if you don't know Nancy, you'll want to join us to meet Nancy and hear her story as a coach coming up through UWSP and this high school coach in the 70s and the impact that she has had. She's going to be joined by John Harry, who is the executive director, and Shelley Johnson, who also is an athlete in the community. So it's sure to be a really great conversation and a really great way to learn more about this exhibit that's going to be on display for 2 years in our community. So I hope you can join us. And then there'll be more information coming, but April 10th, mark your calendars for that, because we're extending Women's History Month, where Sue Schilfer, Mary Patoka, and a few other women from the Women's Fund of Portage County are going to share with everyone who joins us the vision around their strategic plan and what the future holds after 25 years of leadership in our community. So we hope you can join us. And thanks for joining us today, everyone. And thanks, Sarah, Jessica, Lena, for putting together this great discussion, and look forward to more. Thank you.